Hello and welcome to Tuesday Talk, Project Open's weekly podcast, bringing the topics of prevention, treatment, recovery, and basically anything substance use disorder and addiction related to the forefront of local conversations. My name is Akhil Khan. I'm the director of Project Open, which is our multi-county grant here in rural Northwest Illinois. But today with us, we have a national thought leader, Tim Ryan. Tim Ryan is a recovering heroin addict. He is A&E's dope man and a national thought leader on the opioid epidemic, addiction, mental health, and suicide. He's a tireless advocate for long-term recovery, and Tim is no stranger to addiction. Despite a successful business career, Tim found himself in the grips of heroin. Tim's addiction led him into prison, where he served years for a drug-related conviction. He became clean and sober behind bars. And 6 months after his release, he was paving the way for his son, Nick, showing him that there's no future in drugs when tragedy struck. Unfortunately, Nick died of a drug overdose. Reaching beyond the devastation and heartbreak, Tim used Nick's death as an inspiration to spread hope, believing that if even one addict or family could be spared the horrors of addiction, he would make a difference. As a result, he founded a Man in Recovery Foundation, which is a non-for-profit that helps people find treatment and recovery. He ran that foundation for 6 years, assisting thousands of families. And I'm very excited to show and talk to the listeners about that. Tim actually has a local connection to Dixon, and we'll get into that a little bit later. Today, Tim is the subject of the A&E documentary Dope Man, which reaches millions of viewers. He has been featured as a thought leader in numerous national media and television shows, including USA Today's Newsweek, Chicago Tribune, The Steve Harvey Show with Dr. Drew, Doctors TV show, Inside Edition, Tamron Hall TV show, and a number of other nationally syndicated radio shows. He's also the author of a best-selling book, From Dope to Hope. And there's a write-up in 2018 in Real Leaders magazine as Tim being one of the top 100 visionary thought leaders in the world. He was invited to be a guest in the 2016 State of the Union address, which was given by our 44th President, Barack Obama. And, I mean, we can honestly spend an hour talking about all of Tim's credentials and accolades, but I think what our listeners really want to get into is the man here on the screen. So Tim, if you don't mind, add anything to that introduction, and then just give a little bit of background about yourself. And you struggle with addiction, and you have lived experience. If you don't mind, let's dive into it.
Yeah, I'm just another guy in recovery here. I'm Tim Ryan, a grateful recovering alcoholic and drug addict. It's as simple as that. I never in a million years thought I would be doing the things I've done in the past, 8 years since walking out of the Illinois Department of Corrections. But, a little bit on my background, I grew up in Northern Illinois on a lake called Crystal Lake. We're all adopted. My older brother's a couple years older than me. There's me, my little brother and sister. They're 3/4 Chippewa Indian, Native American. So when we grew up in Crystal Lake, there was no Hispanics, there was no African Americans, there was nobody of Indian descent. There was 2 dark-skinned kids, and it was my brother and sister. And we grew up with a lot of racism because they were so dark-skinned. So I learned to protect them, my brother and sister, with my hands and my mouth. We didn't have a bad life. My parents adopted 4 kids. My dad worked at the Board of Trade for 26 years. He never missed a day of work. We had work ethic. We had dinner every night at 6:30. But at 14, I started drinking. The drinking age in Wisconsin was still 18 years old. So at 14, I'm going up to Wisconsin drinking every weekend with my best friend, Randy, who was a senior. At 15, I tried cocaine, and all I really cared about in high school was water skiing. I lived on a lake. I was a competitive water skier. But if you came to the house to water ski, you either brought boat gas, you brought booze, or you brought the ladies to come in the boat and watch us ski. But no, there was no consequences. Nobody was getting in trouble. I made it through high school. I went down to college in Louisiana, and I got into more drugs and ultimately dropped out. And long story short, was at 21 years old, I checked myself into treatment in 1990, the first time. I wanted to quit doing cocaine. I wanted to figure out how to drink like a normal person. But that journey started me on my introduction to the 12-step community and attending 12-step based meetings. And from 1990 up until October 30th of 2012, when I was sentenced to prison, I was in and out of the 12-step based rooms. I think in that 25 years or so, whatever amount of time it was, I probably had a year and a half of continuous sobriety. That was it. And ultimately in sobriety, I was married. I had a wife. I had 4 kids. I was about 14 months sober, and I took a kid from a 12-step base meeting to move out of his apartment in Chicago. And as we're moving Joel out of the bedroom, his roommate Sava pops. He said, "What are you doing here?" I said, "I'm moving out your roommate Joel. What are you doing?" He said, "I'm doing heroin. You want to do some?" And I said, "Sure." Now I'm 14 months sober, going to meetings, 12-step base meetings, but I never really got a sponsor, worked the steps. I thought I could get sober through osmosis. And what's one bag of heroin going to do? That one bag of heroin turned into a 12-year habit. I'd overdosed 8 times, been clinically dead 3, 2 mild heart attacks from cocaine use. You know, it just got worse and worse and worse until ultimately October 30th of 2012, after a 12-year heroin addiction, I was sentenced to 7 years in the Illinois Department of Corrections for my 3rd DUI, which was aggravated. I overdosed on heroin. I hit a few cars, almost killed 4 people. By the grace of God, they were all okay. But they charged me with my 5th driving on revoked, the spoon and syringe. And, you know, I can remember Judge Wattis at Cook County Jail slamming that gavel and saying 7 years. And I was done. It's like I wanted to go to prison. I needed to be sat down, and I was completely dope sick, kicking opiates. I don't think I slept a wink for a month, but I was able to get transferred to Sheridan Prison in Illinois, which at the time, they have 28 prisons. They have 2 with therapeutic drug treatment programs, and the West Care program, a little effort on myself, my cellmate Big Perk. You know, that program saved my life, and the 12-step base program. And that's where I really plugged into recovery, was in that prison cell. My wife divorced me, lost her home in foreclosure. My oldest son was in active addiction. I did 13 and a half months in prison. And for the first time in my life, I was 13 and a half months clean and sober. I got out. My former wife picked me up. Her and my mom had found a little townhouse in a town called Naperville. My mom had paid the rent for 3 months, put $100 a week in my bank account, said that'll last for 3 months. You're on your own, figure it out. And I went back into the technology space. I put recovery first, got another sponsor for 2.5 years, never missed a meeting. And about 3 months in, now I was commuting from Naperville, Illinois to Chicago. I'd walk to the train station, take another train to Palatine, and then take a bus to work. I was commuting 2.5 hours one way to work. 5 days a week. I was back every night for an 8 o'clock 12-step base meeting. And about 3 months in, I just didn't want to do it. I called my mom. I borrowed $15,000, and I set up a Man in Recovery Foundation, a nonprofit to guide and direct indigent people into treatment, into sober living. And I thought I'd pay myself $50,000 a year and save the world. Then I stumbled into working in the treatment industry. And as you had mentioned earlier, unfortunately, on my 21-month sobriety date, my 20-year-old son, Nicholas, succumbed to an accidental drug overdose. And, you know, I went to a 12-step base meeting that night. I never looked back. And, you know, Nick had been to treatment 6 times. He knew what to do. He had been in sober living. He chose to use again, and it got him. And, you know, since my son died, I've been to 150 funerals. I quit going. I've helped assist thousands of people on the road to recovery. And yeah, I've had some cool things happen, but I'm telling you, it doesn't seem to be getting any better out there. Overdose rates are at record high. Alcoholism deaths are at a record high. Suicides at record high. Mental health crisis calls are at record high. What we're doing is not working. And the entire system needs to be shifted, in my view. But who am I? I'm just some guy out here sober trying to make a little bit of a difference. And you know, today then you know, I met my amazing wife 3 years ago. I was in the middle of a second horrific relationship that I stayed in because I had a little daughter, and I have a blessing of a child today, 6-year-old daughter. God called one home, blessed me with another. But I was working and traveling and speaking and doing interventions, but I was in a relationship for the wrong reasons, and I got out of that. And I was looking to partner up with my wife strictly on business. Her name's Jennifer Jimenez. She was a supermodel and an actress, and She's coming up on 16 years sober, but I wanted to partner to speak, to do interventions, to maybe open a program together. And when I finally met Jennifer, I'm in the middle of my second divorce, and it was love at first sight. I finished that divorce. 6 months later, we were engaged. 6 months later, we were married. And now my wife and I, we speak nationwide, internationally on, as you had said, mental health, substance abuse, trauma. She speaks on eating disorders, suicide, bullying, but it's real talk with solutions. We do interventions and we do consulting. She still does acting and modeling. And we live between Los Angeles and South Florida, and are in Chicago all the time because I've got a bunch of kids there, and that's kind of my story, and I'm sticking to it. How's that?
That is, I mean, you talk about a roller coaster ride over there from, I mean, let's go back to the beginning. Growing up in Crystal Lake, adopted, you know, we always talk about addiction doesn't discriminate, right? But there is a higher propensity for lower income individuals or people without college educations that might start using. How do you feel about that statement? And did your upbringing and maybe the absence of knowing your parents, did that have any effect on you or not really?
I don't think so. At least subconsciously, I didn't. It's interesting because 2.5 years out of prison, maybe even 2 years out of prison, I'm in downtown Chicago. I'm working for a treatment center, and I'm at a conference. And there's this gentleman, Dr. Gabor Mate, is the keynote speaker, and he's been a clinician for 40 years. He's out of Canada, and this whole disease and its choices, he says, throw all that out the window. He said, addiction is all stem from trauma, either emotional loss, mental, physical, spiritual, or sexual. And I hear him talking, and I'm like, I don't have any trauma. Then he asked a question. He said, how many people in the audience are adopted? And there's about 300 of us, about 20 of us put our hands up. He said, do you realize you're 48,000 times more susceptible to become an alcoholic or drug addict due to the abandonment issues? Then I started looking at my life. Okay, I was adopted. I had the learning disabilities. I had an older brother that was a narcissist that beat me up every day, molested by the babysitter at 10 years old. Boom, there's my trauma. Drugs and alcohol became my solution to compartmentalize everything. I didn't really start understanding all these things that had happened or how they took place until I got sober and started doing some hardcore therapy work. You know what I mean? So I suggest everybody has a therapist. They're the best things out there. So anyhow, I think it all stems from some form of trauma.
I totally agree with you. And you mentioned an important point, therapist, right? Normalizing that conversation. Everyone, you go see the doctor, no one ever looks at you twice, right? But you say, I'm going to see a therapist, even if we like to call it brain health here as part of our Stigma campaign.
Sure.
Our local gospel calls it brain. The brain can have good days, bad days, and going to see a therapist on the bad days is even going to see on the good days. Why not? To maintain and preventive checks. But it's so stigmatized. People start to look at you a little bit differently, like, oh, you kind of got an issue. How do we combat that? How do we change that narrative?
Unfortunately, I got to tell you, the narrative, everyone's talking, drop the stigma and change the words. And I will tell you, though, this working in the treatment industry, recovery industry, is the most disgusting industry I've ever worked in my entire life. I have never seen more hateful people, from clinicians to business development to treatment owners to people that that are supposed to be helping each other, but there's so much jealousy, backstabbing, hate. And, the thing with social media today is people post something out there and people believe it, and it's not true. And unfortunately, I love to see things come together, but you have so many facets. You have for-profit treatment centers, non-for-profits, people that have HMO insurance, no insurance, state insurance. Everybody should be able to get the option to get treatment, whether you have resources or not, and should be able to get the best options available. But unfortunately, it doesn't happen. Like when I'm in prison, we had a therapeutic community. That therapeutic community, the clinicians, bless all of them, but they're probably the lowest paid individuals I've ever seen working in one of the roughest environments. I mean, pay people what they're worth to keep them around. And so I don't know. I could go on a rant on the industry forever. I mean, there's some great people.
we're going to get to that in a second. So
Yeah.
you talk about, so I think this is a perfect segue to talk about the broke. I got still a bunch more questions from the past, but we'll
Sure.
get to it eventually. You mentioned that, so right now here locally, we're in rural America. There's no treatment center within an hour. Medical detox is starting to become more formalized. It's starting to come. That's helping local people, but then they got to leave the area to go. But then there's bed stipulations. Oh, you're Medicaid. We're full for Medicaid, right? Oh, your private insurance. Come on. And I can't help but think of the saying I've heard multiple times over and over again. Recovery is a business, right?
It absolutely is. I'll tell you right now. So I carry a short-term healthcare insurance policy for myself, my wife, and my 6-year-old daughter. That cost me, just for a 6-month short-term policy, is about $1,200 a month. If I want a good insurance policy, it's going to cost us about $2,500 a month. A lot of people can't afford good insurance today, unfortunately, with COVID and everything happening. And, it's all insurance driven. And you take someone that has an HMO insurance policy, their loved one's going to certify for 14 to 21 days of treatment. That's it. That's all they get. It's not long enough.
Yeah. Who's to say that was what was needed? Some, you might need a lot longer, but it's just you talked about for-profit, non-for-profit, and we work for a non-for-profit here at KSB Hospital. That's who's the sponsor of the Project Open grant. But the saying, no money, no mission. Right. So, even though it's non-for-profit or for-profit, you still got to run it to make money, and just, and how it works. How would you change that? I mean, you said there's a lot of broken ways about the system. If money's the way that goes wrong, is make the wheel go round. How is there a way? Do you see a way out of this to change that so that everyone gets equitable access to the same amount of resources?
No, it never will. Never will. Money drives everything. And unfortunately, the people that have it will always want more amenities. I mean, I see some of these treatment programs, they're $150,000 a month cash pay. And granted, you get lobster and you're on the ocean, but they baby these people more than benefit them. And I go back to, I got sober in a prison cell with the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous and a former Chicago gang chief for 25 years. And we did the deal. I think we need more funding to have longer term programs. I mean, programs need to be 90 days to 6 months with continued sober living. People should be in a program for a minimum of a year, a minimum.
What's your definition of a program, though?
Full detox residential, step down to PHP, step down to IOP, or more health and wellness centers that are working on the outside of the substance abuse, the 9 dimensions of wellness. Because what people ultimately need is connection and purpose, whether they need to be connected into a career, into a college career, or into social circles. People need to be connected with people they can learn from and benefit from. I mean, you're the product of the 5 people you associate with the most. Yeah. But even when people are, 90 days sober and transitioning into structured sober living, they need the accountability. They need the purpose. They need the connection outside of just, people need a routine and they need structure. And we need to implement a lot more of that outside of touchy feelings and how are your feelings and your feelings. Let's get down to causes and conditions. Yeah. I think we need more real talk in treatment too. I see way too many people getting babied because they have good insurance and they don't want to piss off the client with good insurance and tell him the truth because he might leave. But on the flip side, if you don't tell that person the truth and you baby it, they leave, they relapse, they die.
And if they don't die, they're back in treatment, you're making more money, and you do that vicious cycle until they unfortunately do die.
Yeah, it's crazy. I've worked for treatment centers, but I'd have people call. I wouldn't take them, come once, you relapse, you can come back. But after that, go elsewhere. You've been here 2 times. I've seen programs take people 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times over and over and over again. My son that died, he had been to the same treatment center 5 times. And I didn't know where to send him, but I had really good insurance. I could have put him on a plane and put him in a 90-day to 6-month program. I didn't know they existed. I didn't know what I didn't know. So I sent him to the same program 5 times. And another time I sent him to Rosecrans and Rockford. I would have done things so much differently. I just didn't know what to do. And that's a problem. A lot of people, Joe or Bobby or Sue, put their hand up for help. Families don't know where to go. They go to Google, they type in rehab, and then they're overloaded with all the places that are paying for ads, and they're just trying to get Bobby or Susie help.
So you mentioned that you had multiple cycles, right? Because we know that it's what I've learned is that it's oftentimes it takes multiple times until you enter successful recovery. And you mentioned that you had voluntarily done it your first time. You voluntarily admitted, but then you're saying that we need to go to multiple different treatment centers. How would someone in rural America?
No, I'm not. I'm not saying. Don't say that. I've never said anybody needs to go to multiple treatment centers ever. Nobody should have to. People should not be going to treatment multiple times. The reason they're going multiple times is because they were getting crap treatment out of the gate. They weren't getting treatment.
Okay.
You take a person and put them in a group with 40 people and have a clinician that's 22 years old working as an intern running that group for 3 hours. You're not going to learn anything. What am I going to? I did drugs longer than that girl's been alive. What the hell is she going to teach me? We need to, this is life and death here. And that's what people don't understand, especially with the fentanyl today. There's no coming back. You die. So let's quit worrying about people's feelings and get down to the truth here and get them sober. I use a lot of peer-driven programs for my chronic people that are chronic relapsers. I've got a place in South Carolina. It's a 4-month program. I called an AA Big Book Boot Camp. Guess what? People are staying sober there because they're having to do the work. They're going through the steps and they're helping other people go through the steps. I can't tell you how many people go to treatment and have never heard about Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous or Celebrate Recovery or Smart Recovery or Refuge Recovery because that's up to the individual to figure out. They don't teach them that in treatment. Some places do, but a majority don't.
So thanks for clarifying that. So you're saying that if at the first point of contact, if we actually provide the proper treatment, there wouldn't be these cycles. But you're saying
absolutely.
But right now, the system is, in fact, that we know someone comes in, they try their best, or they're just going through the motions. Relapse happens, and your recommendation is don't go back to the same place because it didn't work for you.
Yeah,
try
I
something
would maybe
different.
once or twice, but you need to be working with not only the addiction, the alcoholism or drug addiction. You need to be working with the mental health component, and you need to be working with the trauma component. So try finding EMDR certified level 1 and 2 trauma therapists to work with someone on state insurance. Going to one of the local programs and where you are in Illinois, you're not going to get it. You will not get it. So we are doing a disservice to the clientele that are going and asking for help when in those situations, they usually see a therapist for a half hour once a week. So they do a 3-week stay. They got an hour and a half of therapy, and all the rest they did was sit in some groups and listen to somebody talk. That's treatment. That's not treatment. That's putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. And no wonder why people are relapsing and dying and committing suicide and coming back because we're not giving them the appropriate care. You need people usually clear 90 days off everything to give a proper psychiatric diagnosis. And people are already out of treatment and gone.
Right. No, I'm happy you brought up EMDR. My father passed away in 2012, and just a couple of years ago, I tried EMDR just to help because I felt like I still had things locked in, some demons still locked in.
Yeah.
Tried EMDR, and it's a good aspect. You have to approach it from a holistic view. You can't just if you treat this one part over here, something else moves over here. Treat the whole person. We talk about social determinants of health. Healthcare is only a very minor portion of someone's well-being. There's so many other aspects, the social aspect, the nutritional aspect, the physical environment, the neighborhood they grow up, education, socioeconomic, all that impacts it. And so, I mean, there's a big push to start embedding social workers into medical practices to once you address health issues, but once you identify social issues or housing issues or childcare issues, you can do all that at the point of care. Is there some model like that might work in, or have you seen a model like that for helping people with recovery?
Not that detailed. I mean, you've got like out here in Los Angeles, you have Homeboy Industries that Father Gregory Boyle started, and it's a reentry program for gang members or people coming out of the prison system. And they integrate them into the program. They pay them a 40-hour a week salary. 20 hours the week they're getting training and parenting, anger management, recovery, whatever. The other 20 hours a week they're learning a trade skill. So they'll do culinary arts, they'll do the bakery, they'll do the kitchen, they'll do the screen printing, they'll do the welding, but they integrate people back into society and give them jobs and careers. We need more organizations like that in the recovery industry. I've seen some great programs. It might be long-term for indigent or whatever, like in San Antonio, Texas. I mean, you can be homeless and come off the street and walk into detox. You can have kids and stay there, and they'll bus your kids to school. But getting people then connected with the career moves and all that, I think we need to get away with a lot of the felony backgrounds and things and give people a shot at getting their life back once they get sober, because you have a lot of people that had a criminal background or whatever. They get sober, they do the sober living, but they can't get a job outside of McDonald's or Taco Bell. It gets real frustrating.
One of the big projects we're doing on that front is it started in New Hampshire called the Recovery Friendly Workplace, where we're trying to make workplaces more recovery friendly, because we know that 70% of people who use illicit drugs, or about 66%, they're actively employed. And it costs the economy, if you look at it just globally, because you mentioned money in dollars and cents, and I agree that that's what makes the grease, it's the grease that makes the world go round. It costs this United States billions of dollars in lost absenteeism, lost productivity, turnover. And then if you can make the workplaces more recovery friendly, people might then seek help because they can go talk to their managers about it. And then the other side of that coin is helping employers relook at antiquated hiring practices, right? That might be your best worker you have sitting there in front of you, but they have a nonviolent drug felony from 8 years ago. You hire them, then they get screened out in the background check, and that person then, unfortunately, employment's would you agree employment's one of the biggest factors to sustaining recovery, and then they get kicked out of that?
Yep. I absolutely agree. And, unfortunately, that's probably one of I don't know, I've always had a type A personality, but that's one of the reasons I work for myself and start my own businesses, is because I don't ever want to be in a situation, someone saying, oh, you didn't have a driver's license for 20 years, you can't work for us, and people want to live through, we need to work on cleaning those things up. People have hit that 5-year mark in long-term, over 5 years sober, they're considered in long-term recovery. Their chances of relapse are very minimal. Give these people an opportunity. Like you said, they're some of your best employees. I was a recruiter for 23 years, and I can tell you the people that were sober were the best employees ever. And actually, a lot of people that were in addiction were really good employees, and they'd be a hell of a lot better if they got sober.
There's a stat, I don't have it in front of me right now, but I think it's, I'll speak generally. I don't have the numbers exactly, but people who are in recovery miss fewer days of work as compared to those who are not, and then they have lower turnover. I think it's 9.5 days to 10.5 days annually, and 21%, maybe 22% as compared to 25% to the general workforce. So there's actually data around that quantifies that people who are in recovery are going to be very motivated to work. And we know housing, employment, transportation, those are kind of your big three. And in rural America, we're trying to address all those. I'll start with the housing front. We're looking at starting a sober living home. A local recovery community organization, Sauk Valley Voices of Recovery, is looking to start a sober living home because people are being driven hours away for treatment. They want to come back to the local area, but they have nowhere else to go besides the house that they got picked up from, where all the illness is happening. What's your views on sober living?
Sober livings are essential. What happens, unfortunately, is a lot of communities, we don't want those people in our neighborhood. We'd rather have John Polo, the child molester, living two doors next door than Bob and Sue that are, sober, trying to turn their lives around. I mean, these are people that are productive members of society. These are the people you want in your neighborhoods, that are going to not only take care of the property, they're going to take care of the neighborhood and keep the riffraff out. They're the best people there. And what people need to understand is the Oxford homes, which have 10,000 sober homes nationwide, DePaul University has done an evidence-based study on them for the past 16 years. Any community in the United States they've ever tried to open a sober living in, they've won. You cannot discriminate due to the Fair Housing Act against people struggling with mental health or substance misuse disorder. So they're needed, essential, and they're a must. I mean, they're absolutely a must in a community.
You know, the funny thing I heard is that that's the one house in the neighborhood that you can guarantee doesn't have drug use in it, right? I mean, and all the neighbors around it might have that drug use, but the sober living home, but that not in my backyard mentality. How do you overcome that with sober living homes?
By education, by educating people. I mean, today, I don't think there's a person out there that doesn't have a family member, loved one, or friend that has been touched by alcoholism, drug addiction, or mental health. And sometimes it's just educating people. That's all. You know, and you can say, well, would you rather have 6 or 8 cars coming in here every day with people that are sober, or do you want to watch 200 cars pull out of your local bar every day and hope to God they don't kill someone because they're drunk? What do you want to do? You know, it's just education. A lot of people are ignorant, unfortunately. You know, they don't have the details, and that's the whole thing with this pandemic we have. If we had better education and prevention, we wouldn't be in this situation right now.
You mentioned you overdosed 8 times, and 3 of them you were
clinically dead.
Heart stopped. Help some of the listeners understand that, hey, after the first time you're almost clinically dead, what was preventing you? Because you entered treatment voluntarily the first time, right?
That was 25 years prior.
Okay, so that was 25 years prior.
That was in 1990. Yeah, we're talking, you know, I didn't get sober until 2012.
So can you kind of get us into the mind frame of someone who has had multiple overdoses? What can we do to help them stop using? I know we started these leave behind kits. We started education.
You got to understand, I had a 5-bedroom house in the suburbs, 3-car garage. I had an office in the Wrigley building, Michigan Avenue. I made about $500,000 a year, but I spent it because I had a huge heroin habit. I didn't care if I lived or died. I could give a shit. I lived to use, I used to live. I mean, I would spend 2 to 3 nights a week under Lower Wacker Drive with the homeless people, with my buddy Mike and Cecil and Patch, because that's where I was more comfortable instead of being in my 5-bedroom house with my wife and 4 kids. To answer your question, my parents and my wife at the time should have got a professional interventionist and had an intervention done on me, because I was so full of crap. I turned my wife into my enabler, my parents, and I asked them after the fact, why didn't you do anything? And well, this and that. They should have hired an interventionist and done an intervention out of the gate. Or my wife and kids should have left.
Yeah. So was it at that time? Was it the absence of connection? Was it toxic relationships that?
No, I just you. You do heroin, you fall in love with it. That's all I cared about. That's it. You got to understand, I still ran. I was a Cub Scout Packmaster. I ran 38 Cub Scout dens. You know, doing all the meetings, the Pinewood Derbies, the parade, shooting heroin every day. I totally functioned. I went to work. I ran the Cubs. I was a Packmaster. I went on every day doing heroin. Nobody knew I did it. No one.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
And unfortunately, that's the way a lot of people are today. You know, and if they're not doing heroin, the pills or whatever, I mean, people don't. I don't know the answer to your question. My wife and I were doing an intervention a month ago with an A-list celebrity. A house in the hills, more money than they know what to do with, in the loneliest person in the world, because all they're doing is Ambien, Xanax, Soma, buying Oxycontin and Xanax on the street, and has no clue about fentanyl, overdosing, nothing. This happens on a daily basis.
Talk about fentanyl, Tim. What are you seeing now? Since you've done so many interventions, I mean, one time, one kid at one party, hey, take this pill, you'll have a great time. Boom, done. Never used drugs, never thought of drugs. Peer pressure that one moment. How has fentanyl changed the game?
The entire drug game has changed. And don't get me wrong. I'm not sitting here telling people, and I don't want people. I know people are going to experiment. And I've got a lot of people I grew up with that, you know, in the out of high school, college, young business years, they might have tried a little cocaine or smoke some weed or whatever, but they never had an issue. Here's the problem. Those recreational people are dying. I mean, when you're having fentanyl put in cocaine, a kid thinks he's buying a Xanax bar or an Oxycontin pill or whatever. I mean, fentanyl is 50 to 100 times stronger than pure heroin. Carfentanil, I mean, that's an elephant tranquilizer. 3 grains of it will kill 10 people, and that is what is being cut into crystal methamphetamine, into pills, into cocaine, into heroin, and there's no coming back from fentanyl. You do fentanyl, you're gonna die. And that's all there is to it. And the thing is, overdoses are getting worse. When I started 8 years ago, I think 117 people a day were dying. It's over 200 right now, and it's not getting any better. So we really need to look at it. Obviously, if we have a 90% failure rate in treatment and 10% success rate, we're doing something drastically wrong, but it needs to be on a federal level and change drastically because we're losing too many people.
So federal level, you mentioned a peer-driven program, and right now, in my experience, peer support. I've heard peer support is equally as important, if not more important than treatment. But it's not sustainable. We have a peer recovery community right now that is struggling to make ends meet because they have no billing opportunities, no reimbursement opportunities. Is that the direction we need to head? Giving more federal funding to peer support?
So on the flip side, go up to McHenry County and see what Chris Reed's doing. He runs the other side, which was the sober nightclub and bar. They opened a coffee shop. He's got New Direction Sober Living. They bought a homeless shelter and opened, I think, a 40-bed peer-driven program, and they have a for-profit treatment center, so they can basically help anybody. You have no insurance, we'll get you detox, we'll put you in our peer-driven program. You need sober living, we have that. Their model is working, but you also have a community where it's probably easier to get jobs versus Dixon. I mean, if you can't get a job in Dixon, you have to get on the highway and go down the road 20 miles to the next community.
Right.
So that's one of the downsides. But the sober living, you could have a peer-driven program. It's a matter of getting a couple of the bigger industries in Dixon willing to hire people that are living in these sober homes and give them a fair wage to live in an opportunity to grow within their organization.
You just laid out a very interesting template with Chris Reed's program, and I'm very excited to research that after this talk. You mentioned your peer-driven program. How is yours similar to his, or different?
I don't run a peer-driven program. When we were using Man Recovery Foundation, we had a place in South Carolina called Oaks Recovery, which at the time we could get people in for $1,200 a person, and that would pay for their first 30 days. They have to be detoxed. No mind-altering substances. It's men only, no cell phones. First 2 weeks, you're getting acclimated. Everybody works part-time. They help you get a job. Then you pay your own way through the program. So you're going through the steps. You're learning to work and pay bills and manage your money and pay rent and be accountable. And after 90 days, you've already went through the steps and you're taking the new people through it. You have the spiritual awakening. That's what's missing in so many programs. I can't tell you how many people still go to 12-step meetings today that have never worked the steps, because that's what I did for 30 years. I never worked them.
So do you believe the 12-step program works, but only if you're committed to walking them?
It's a great, there's nothing that can compare to it. More people are in long-term recovery through the 12 steps, in my opinion, than any other program in the world. The problem is, well, it doesn't work. I don't believe in God. People would rather bash it than try it. And if everybody in the country did the 12 steps, whether you're an alcoholic or not, you would be a better person. It's as simple as that. But people want to fight. They want to do this. Do what works for you. I don't care. But it only works if you work it. You know, you can go to all the meetings you want. You're not going to get sober through osmosis. You have to work on the internal work, not the external. Everything can be shiny and pretty on the outside, but a lot of people are walking voids on the inside.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. And
Yeah.
before we transition to what is working, do you have any more comments as to what other elements of the system are broken and what's not working when it comes to
There's so
treatment?
much that's broken. I mean, it's access to treatment. No one should say I need help and then be told you need to call you're on a 6 to 8 week waiting list, but you need to call every Friday at noon. What alcoholic or drug addict is going to remember to call every Friday at noon? We could go with Narcan. Narcan, greatest tool ever invented. What happens in your community if somebody overdoses? They're brought to your hospital. They're revived with Narcan and brought to your hospital, right? And about 3 hours later, they walk out the door, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a failure.
Right.
I've been preaching for 7 years that if somebody is taken to a hospital due to an overdose, they should be put on a 5 to 7 day psychiatric hold immediately. No questions asked. If Narcan was not administered, they would be dead. But we're letting them walk out of the hospital 3 hours later to go use again and then overdose and die. Narcan is a tool. Now the tool got Bobby or Susie in the hospital. Let's get them on a psych hold. Let's do a full evaluation and let's get them into treatment. See, there's a law in Florida called the Marchman Act, or there's first the Baker Act. So we'll pick on my buddy Danny. Danny is, me and you are in Dixon, and Danny's a dear friend of ours, but he's struggling really bad. Well, we can Baker Act him and call the police and, hey, he's drinking or doing drugs. He's a harm and danger to himself. They'll put him on a psych hold. Why he's on a psych hold, we can go in front of a judge and say, look, this is a pattern. He's not doing it. He keeps walking out of treatment. The judge will charge him under the Marchman Act, and he'll have two choices. He can go to treatment for a minimum of 4 months, or he can go to jail for 6 months. Most people go to treatment. But yeah, sometimes people need to be forced, and we need to have more mandates and process so people can be forced into treatment, especially people struggling with mental health issues.
Yeah,
and there's not enough quality mental health care out there, especially for people that don't have finances.
Right. That Marchman Act is very, very interesting. Gerald Lott with Psychology Voices of Recovery, he shared that with me. What other states have similar laws like that?
Kentucky. There's 28 states that have laws like that, but Florida has the best laws, bar none.
What's preventing other states from doing it?
Politics. All politics. 4 years ago, a buddy of mine, Randy Grimes, he's a former pro football player. Randy and I are doing a speaking event in Central Illinois, and we're with the former lieutenant governor. And she gets up and speaks and says, Illinois is cutting edge on the opiate epidemic. We have $58 million, and we have a statewide coalition, and we're going to open methadone clinics in the rural communities, and we're going to get Narcan everywhere. And when I got up to speak, I said, Lieutenant Governor, I appreciate everything you do, but I said, you don't know what you're talking about. I said, you guys have a statewide coalition. How many people in recovery, long-term recovery, are on that coalition? None. You have a bunch of politicians. There's your first mistake. Second, she said, we're getting Narcan everywhere. I said, Narcan is everywhere. You can walk into any drugstore and get it. Second mistake. And I said, now you want to open methadone clinics in the rural communities of Illinois? She said, yeah. I said, what are you going to do when Johnny's at 100 milligrams and he wants to get off it? She said, well, we'll put him into detox. I said, mistake number 3. I said, ma'am, nowhere in the state of Illinois will they detox anyone off 100 milligrams of methadone. You need to be at 25 milligrams or less. And that's who's making the decisions here. People that don't understand substance abuse or addiction or mental health. There's your first flaw out of the gate.
Right. Now, I tell the story in most Tuesday talks, but we were sitting as a group of nurses, pharmacists, doctors, all professionals trying to cook up solutions. And it was the people with the lived experience that said, appreciate it, we love it, but here's how it's not going to work. Here's how people with addictions view that solution. They're not going to use it. This is how you have to do it. And they totally, lived experience is the most important voice, which is why I was super excited to have you on the line. I want to make a shift to kind of what's working. You've mentioned Danny, you mentioned Dixon. Talk about your connection to us here locally.
So Danny, we got connected up 2015, and Danny and myself and some people from KSB and Mississippi, can't even remember. It was basically Danny and I we put together the second program in the country, the Safe Passages Initiative, where an addict or alcoholic could walk into the Dixon police station and ask for help. And it went really well because nobody was doing this. So we had the partnerships with the treatment centers. I would drive every Monday night 100 miles from my house to Dixon and run a family support group meeting. And we did that for 2.5, 3 years. And, you know, Dixon was, it's near and dear to me because we started something there that spread nationwide and all over Illinois. And it was because of Danny picking up the phone and working with someone like me. And Danny, I consider a dear friend of mine. And, you know, we need more people like Danny out there working with people like me to make good things happen out there. There's a testimony in itself. Danny and I made it happen. Yeah,
no, Danny is still heavily involved in the local community. He's city manager now, so he's got a more global view, and we worked together on a number of projects. And I was happy when he made the connection, because after doing some research, I was like, okay, how else can we pick Tim's brain? What else can we do? And you got a number of good ideas. You mentioned something about when someone comes into the hospital after having an overdose and they get discharged right away. But I'm starting to hear these trends with peer navigators embedded in the hospital that can go to the bedside in the ED and work with that individual. Is that something that has some legs to it or no?
I don't think so. I mean, to be honest with you, you've got, and this is all from experience and learning. You know, I've done a number of interventions and I was trained with some of the best, but you're going to take someone that, you know, might be 2 years sober, really no educational experience, no life experience, but they're the go-to person to talk that person into getting help in 2 to 3 hours. No, that's why people need to be put on a cycle. Do I think the navigation helps? But where's the follow-up? Okay, 10 people come in, 10 people leave. How many are you actually following up with? There's only so much people can do, but anything's better than nothing. I mean, if you're able to give people some resources, hopefully they'll call. I mean, hopefully they won't overdose. I had the deputy chief of police in Naperville, Brian Cunningham. Brian, we helped start the same program in Naperville through Brian, and he went to the Woodridge police station as chief of police, and he had called me, same situation. 2 people from Woodridge taken to Naperville Hospital, both OD'd, revived with Narcan, both left the hospital, both dead within 24 hours from overdosing again. How the hell is that a solution? It's not a solution. If somebody came in with a heart attack, they're not going to give them an EpiPen, say you're fine, and send you out the door. They're going to do rapid tests. You're going to be kept for a few days.
Yeah. That's pretty funny analogy.
So it needs to start with our medical care system too. But on the flip side, when I was in Naperville, I lived 3 blocks from the hospital. So I would get calls all the time for ODs. And I can remember I was friends with a lot of the ER doctors. And this guy says, Tim, you know, I got this kid coming in here, 8th time he's overdosed, and I'm having to spend my time with him. And this guy that just had a heart attack died on me because I wasn't able to spend the quality time trying to resuscitate him because I'm wasting my time with this junkie over here. I get it. I see the frustration too, you know? So I don't know what the answer is. I really don't.
Well, you mentioned it early on, language matters, right? So I've, connected with Donald McDonald, who's a very good Stigma speaker. And he talks about like, hey, when you come to the ED for the 3rd, 4th time, oftentimes that frustration and that burnout hits the nurses, hits the docs. Oh, you're back again. Or you're here versus, I'm sorry that didn't work for you last time. Let's try something different.
Donald McDonald, my friend from North Carolina.
Yeah, Donald McDonald from North Carolina. He recently started a podcast as well, just this week. Yesterday was his first episode, I think.
Yeah, he just hosted that event that was in Dixon recently, and we did an event in North Carolina a few years ago. Really good gentleman, really good guy.
He actually, so when we got the Project Open grant, he was our technical assistance lead from JBL International or JBS International.
Oh, okay.
So I heard him talk in DC in 2018, and then lo and behold, he was our right-hand guy supporting Project Open. So his handprints are all over our project.
Awesome.
As well as Robert Childs, who's also in North Carolina, which brings me to another topic. How do you feel about what are some of the most successful harm reduction tactics you've seen out there? Because if we can't get people to stop using, at least prevent them from dying, and eventually you hope that they can get connected to treatment.
That's not happening.
Well,
so here's my
service programs might say differently, right?
I've got to see it and touch it, but I used to go to the Chicago Recovery Alliance 15 years ago and get syringes and all that. Here's the whole thing with harm reduction is, let's use medicated assisted treatment, Suboxone. Okay. What's happened with that today is it's medicated assisted treatment or therapy, call it what you want. It's turned into prescribing a med and that's it. So that's not a solution. Getting people hooked on Suboxone without therapy. If people are seeing a psychiatrist, a therapist weekly, and taking the meds, you got a ticket for success. And working with the recovery, AA, NA, whatever. If not, it's not. But on the harm reduction side, we're wanting to open safe injection sites where, Susie can come in and shoot up with clean needles and make sure she doesn't OD and die and do your heroin. Now go back out there and do 8 more tricks and sell your body so you can get some more money to get a little heroin and eat some food, but we'll make sure you have a clean needle. That's not helping anybody. How is that helping anyone?
Well, the idea is that if you're already starting to think about using cleanly, if you're already thinking about getting clean needles, the data shows that people are 5 times more likely to enter treatment if they're using a syringe service program.
Really? I'd like to see that data because I'd like to talk to those 5%, those people that actually go in. I just don't see it because with fentanyl today, you're giving people a clean needle, you're giving them a delivery mechanism to die.
But they're going to use anyways, don't you think, Tim? And at least give them the clean needle so that they're not getting Hep C or any
Hep C. When's the last Hep C outbreak you heard of? My best friend's got AIDS. He takes pills for it. He's fine. There is no AIDS spread. There is no Hep C spread. That's a bunch of bullshit. That's over with.
The cost of treatment for that one person is very expensive. That could be saved with that little needle.
No, but that's not happening because that average person is probably overdosed 5-10 times that ambulances have had to pick up, get them to the hospital. All those costs we're forgetting about. Then the cost of them stealing from this store or that store. It's, yesterday I'm out here in California. Do you know people can go into a store and steal up to $900 worth of stuff and not get arrested? I'm in Target and I see this homeless guy loading up his bag with half gallons of booze and he walks out the front door, no questions asked. But, I think harm reduction would work better if we were actually bridging the gap and quit trying to justify that a $500 a day heroin addict like me needs a clean needle. No, I needed a damn intervention. I needed to be put in a lockdown facility. I needed to go to prison because I couldn't go anywhere. And I needed to be with me, myself, and I and my own thoughts. And I needed to shit and puke myself and be dope sick and not sleep for 30 days and never forget that pain. And November 1st, I'll be 9 years sober. We're babying people too much today. You baby them, you're going to keep burying them. We need to, I live in LA, the homelessness, there's 80,000 homeless people here. 90% of them are struggling with mental health and substance abuse, and there's zero resources for them. It's not the answer.
You mentioned
let's make sure you got a clean needle, but you don't have any clean socks or underwear to wear because you're sleeping under the bridge.
Well, I think, a proper syringe service program that I've researched has all those elements, right? It has not just a clean needle, but tourniquet and resources and alcohol swabs and socks and connection to resources but you could just have a program, I suppose, that just had the needle and that
I really would like to know how many of these people are actually getting off the streets and are now clean and sober and productive members of society. I mean, I get it, and I'm not here to knock it. I think what we're doing with it needs to be changed. I mean, meet them where we're at. That's what I did with my support groups. You could come high on Methadone, Suboxone, Xanax. I didn't care, but I'd like to try to guide and direct you ultimately to an abstinence-based lifestyle. Hey, I got lots of opiate addict friends today that smoke weed, and I don't care. Smoke your brains out. You're not putting a needle in your arm. And they're working and productive. Mm-hmm. If that's recovery for them, that's recovery. Yeah, and I support them 1,000%. So when we're dealing with people putting fentanyl in their arms, I think a needle's just a delivery mechanism to OD and die a lot quicker.
Earlier, you talked about MAT, and our local MAT program admits that, hey, MAT is just 10% of the treatment. The other 90% is all the psychosocial intervention. So if you have an MAT program out there that's just doing the medication, they're totally missing the boat.
Yeah.
And I couldn't agree with you more. And that comes back to, again, that concept of the multi-prong approach and treating the whole person and addressing all the issues and not just one element of it, because you can poke here, you poke here and something else opens there.
But it's two sides that people don't see. I had a buddy go to Florida, he was a heroin addict, 35, went to treatment in Florida, came back and was doing IOP at a place in Naperville. And about 90 days into his IOP, they said, hey, you either need to get on methadone or Suboxone or you need to leave our program. And he said, what are you talking about? I went to detox and treatment and now I'm clean. And yeah, but for you to stay in our program, we're concerned about you and you really need to be on methadone or Suboxone. What they were trying to do is get him to go on methadone or Suboxone because they can keep him in their program for up to 3 more years. That's what they were trying to do, because if he's clean, they can't keep billing his insurance anymore. So there's that side of the industry that people don't want to talk about too, unfortunately. The money.
We were looking at a methadone clinic over here, and we really got, I don't want to say dissuaded, but it was just like, hey, look, do Suboxone first and do all that. And then if all those doesn't work, then explore methadone. How do you feel about the two drugs?
Well, I was on methadone, and my drug dealer took me to the methadone clinic. He said, Tim, you're doing too much heroin. You're going to die. But I remember getting on it, and I told my wife, and I got up to about 90 milligrams, and I got really angry. And then they told me it wasn't addictive, so I quit taking it. I had never been so sick in my entire life. And I had to call my dealer, and I said, how do I get off this? He said, you got to start shooting heroin again. And that's exactly what I did. I went back to shooting heroin to get off the methadone. I'm no doctor, but I've had people, I had a kid at 250 milligrams. He spent 4 months at an inpatient detox facility to get weaned down, but it took him almost a year to feel better. I don't know. Some people are successful, but more people abuse it. You get up to 80 milligrams of methadone and pop a Xanax, you're higher than you are on heroin. So I don't know why we're not giving people the opportunity to get clean and sober without anything. Let's get them sober and teach them how to live life and give them a little bit of that. We just want to throw pills at everything. Pills the answer for everything. No wonder why we've got more. 90% of the pain pills made in the world are all used in the United States of America. 90%. We write pills for everything. I did Suboxone. I did methadone. Guess what? I kept using. This is me. I got sober in a prison cell. So, got me.
I mean, but don't you feel like sometimes, without medical detox, it could be dangerous?
Oh, absolutely. No, I'm not talking medical. Everybody should do a medical detox. Absolutely. But unless they're working with a psychiatrist and a therapist and a sponsor of some sort, you're setting people up to fail. And unfortunately, if people don't keep seeing their therapist, they still get their Suboxone script. So where are the P's and Q's? Where are checks and errors? Because I thought it's medicated assisted treatment, not just medication.
Yeah, and so those programs, those programs really need to evaluate that holistic approach, because you can't just prescribe a blood pressure reducing medication and not give the counseling and education with it.
And they're trying to get more. I think you have to take a 6 or 8 hour course to be able to prescribe Subutex or Suboxone. And, doctors.
It's 8 hours for doctors, 24 hours for APPs and nurse practitioners, which I don't understand.
You're right. I don't know. But the chicken or the egg, I just don't want to see people dying. And if it works for them, do it, man. You can't help you if you're dead.
Right now, one of our pushes, our local project, is we're going to be working pretty soon to get our local residents who are in our family medicine or rural medicine track to get MAT waivered and trained, so that when they go enter their full-blown independent practice, that they may be willing to accept a few patients who need that service, but integrate it into their larger practice so we can combat the stigma that you just don't have, those people sitting in that waiting room, they're all former addicts, it's
Right.
being mixed in with the normal, medicine practice.
Exactly.
And I know your time is valuable. I did want to, start to talk. I mean, what else is working that we need to continue to do? I mean, so rural America, we lag behind. You're on the West Coast. You've got all these pretty cool homes and concepts. East Coast, similar way, and it seems like it takes a couple of years for the central part of America to catch up. What is something that Project Open could be doing immediately today to help close some of those gaps?
Boy, that's a great question. I mean, I think you guys are doing what you're doing now. You're talking about it. You're surrounded with thought leaders that can bring the guidance and direction. And it's starting to put that flag in your town. And that started 6 years ago with Danny, started in the Safe Passages Initiative and getting the sober livings and with what the hospitals, and you guys are all involved together and keep taking input from people in the recovery community. They're your best assets, and you've got some great people in your backyard there.
No, I think you're right. I'd love for you to come whenever you're in the area next. You got to let us know, because we'd want to come and show you some of the things that the sober living home is almost, it's nearing completion of closing down that. But, we went and got bought in from police chiefs and city managers and state attorneys, because it takes the whole village to make it successful. You can't do it in isolation. And
absolutely.
The next big piece is education around that and trying to expand MAT. But, prevention, we harp on prevention as being one of our biggest pushes. Recovery, obviously, right now, a lot of activities going over there. On the prevention front of things, what would you say some of those big projects we could look at for prevention?
Well, here's the problem with prevention. I speak in schools, high schools, middle schools, colleges nationwide with my wife. Most schools bring you in once every 2 years. Are you insane? We should be talking on a daily basis. How is people's mental health? How are they doing? Especially in a community like Dixon, a lot of the kids are going home to single parents, wondering if they're going to have food on the table, taking care of their siblings, trying to take care of mom or dad who might be struggling with substance abuse or mental health. And who's helping these people? It's shocking with what the kids are experiencing today, and we need more resources. We need support groups for these kids, whether it's trauma, it's alcoholic parents, whatever, that they have somewhere to talk to and they can be safe and get the resources needed. I can't tell you how many parents I've helped from kids coming up to me at speaking events and saying, hey, can you help my mom or dad? And it's heart-wrenching that they have to come up to me to get help because they didn't know where to turn to.
Support groups in the school. That's a pretty interesting concept. Safe space during school hours and can keep it kind of anonymous.
So, well, think about it. My wife and I don't know why Shelbyville, Indiana sticks in our mind, but we spoke and there's 2,500 students. We received over 800 Instagram messages from the kids. And the last one was from a girl, Lily, at 2:30 in the morning. And my wife says, Lily, why are you messaging me so late? Why aren't you sleeping? Why do you have your cell phone? And she's like, you're the only person that heard me today. You spoke my story. And it's like, my God, schools don't have mental health counselors. They don't have substance abuse counselors on staff. They have guidance counselors. We need more mental health and substance abuse counselors on staff. We need more support groups. We have support groups for violin club and glee club and speaking club. And why don't we have groups for kids that are struggling with cutting or mental health or suicidal thoughts and make these open conversations? If we did that and the kids could go get a check-in, they'd be more productive. And I empower kids to snitch on their friends. If they've got a friend struggling, thinking of suicide, getting bullied, snitch on them so we can get them the help they need.
That's interesting. We Project Open has helped expand, hundreds and hundreds of hours of school-based health counselors. So actually from Mississippi, going into the schools, we canvassed all the schools who didn't have adequate services, got counselors into those schools and started to wipe out those waiting lists for kids who needed school-based health counseling. The next phase of that iteration is actually school-based health centers, embedding a clinic in the school, not only addressing medical, but socially, emotional, and in a perfect world, dental and vision, and working through unfortunately, working through the financials of that to make sure that would be sustainable long-term. But I totally agree with you. broken kids grow up to become broken adults who raise broken kids. You've got to break that vicious cycle of intergenerational trauma. I think it starts in the schools, and I like the support group idea, and I'm going to start to research the legal parameters around that to see what we can do.
Cool. That's the way to go. There's my freebie for the day.
Any other closing thoughts, Tim? I really appreciate your time today, and it's
it's
broken combo.
Don't judge a book by its cover. Give everybody a shot. If they got a heartbeat, they got hope. Put your hand up, ask for help. If I can do it, anybody can.
I love it. My name is Akil Khan, Director of Project Open. Please visit theprojectopen.com to learn more about what we do. This recording will live on YouTube, Facebook, and the Project Open page. Again, with us, Tim Ryan, we're going to go through it. Recovering heroin addict, A&E's dope man, national thought leader, founder of a Man in Recovery Foundation, and author of From Dope to Hope, among many other things. Very much appreciated your time, and we'll see you soon.
Take care. Have a great day. I appreciate it.
Thank you.